in to be a part of this very important mission to change the nation and make America more inclusive, more equitable. Now today, the nation is facing one of the great crises in American history. We know that there are record numbers of people out of work. Anyone know the number of people out of work in this nation? 14 million people do not have a job. 14 million people do not have a job. But over 160 million people are working. So there are people working, but too many people not working. You know that. What we haven't talked about as a country is what has happened in this country over the last 20 to 25 years. Because while we had, in the 90s and in the first 5 years of the 21st century, record levels of people working, low unemployment, people buying homes, something was happening to be between, underneath the surface. What was happening is the gap between the haves and the have-nots has grown since 1980. Grown since 1980. Those with lots of money got even lots more money. Those in the working class and the middle class saw their pay rates and wage rates stagnate. But there was a smoke screen and a camouflage, and we were allowed to, in some ways, fake our own selves out during that time period. Because you know what we had? Credit cards. Credit cards. When I grew up, little boy, I thought credit cards were something only rich people. Most people lived with the money they made every week, and when that was gone, that was it. And all of a sudden, we had a system where everybody had credit cards. So it meant maybe you made $40,000 a year, but I had 10 or 15,000 more I could put on a credit card. So I didn't feel my pay. So while my wages were not going up, I didn't feel it the same way because I had access to credit. Access to credit. And organizations that fought for equity celebrated that as a good thing because finally middle income and working income people had credit in many cases for the first time. So it wasn't all a bad thing. What was a bad thing is when you had credit, and even though the market interest rate was 6 or 7%, you were paying 18% on a credit card. You were being loan sharked and didn't even know. That is what has happened with high unemployment and a gap between rich and poor, or I like to say have-mores, haves, and have-nots. Because it's the have-mores, the haves, and the have-nots have seen their wage rate. Why am I saying that? Every generation has its mission, its causes, the battles that it must fight that are worth fighting. This generation think will have the mission in front of it, the mission of economic equity, and how the future economy is going to produce not only jobs, but jobs that pay living wages and give people a chance to survive. Economic equity, so that college and higher ed is not so unaffordable or so beyond people's reach that even people that want to go to college, prepared to go to college, ready to work, can't go because they can't afford it. Economic equity, because it's still the case. Don't let anybody tell you any otherwise. The more education you have, the more money you're going to make. People tell me, well, look at Puffy. Puffy went to Howard University for 3.5 years. He wasn't a high school dropout. He might have not got the piece of paper, but he got to the finish line, just didn't finish. The more education you have, the better off you will be. And we have to instill that in our young people. Don't fall into the game, don't fall into the trap, don't fall for the head fake. That's the way it is. So every generation has a mission. So in this, young professionals, and with our work with young people, we're trying to build young people that are going to have some passion, have some fight, want to help us do something, not only just for yourselves, but for your generation and for others who might not have what you have. And we're building this and we're working this across the country. So I would like to certainly, for all of you that have decided to become a part of what we're building, thank you. For those of you that are considering it, I hope you'll say yes. For those that have said yes, I hope you will recruit 10 others. I hope you will come to and be a part of some of the exciting things we have in store in 2012. The national organization in March puts together what we call a legislative conference. We also released our own report called the State of Black America Report. We will release it this year at a town hall meeting at Howard University in Washington, D.C. That'll be televised nationally. Then, in July of next year, last week in July, we have our annual convention. We call it our conference. It'll take place in my hometown, New Orleans, Louisiana. We have an invitation out to President Obama. Whoever the Republican Party nominates, we will invite them too. We believe that everybody needs to come talk to you about what they want to do if they become president of the United States. If you become a part of what we're trying to build, you have a chance to participate in those events and those activities. You will meet young people like yourselves. You will meet influencers. We have a career fair with 200 employers who are on-site interviewing people for work. We have workshops, seminars, speeches, and things of interest. So Vince, thank you. And board members, raise your hand. We want to give the board members a big hand. Thank you. My colleagues, one Herman Lassard. Herman Lassard is our Senior Vice President of Affiliate Services. In his career, has been president of 2 Urban League affiliates, one in Austin, Texas, the other in St. Petersburg, Florida, and now is on the staff of the National Urban League. In the back, we have Teresa Candori. Teresa is our Director of Media Relations. For the Governor of Pennsylvania, Ed Rendell. And then in the rear, Jackie Avery McMillan. Jackie has been with the National Affiliate staff 20 years. She works in affiliate services and works very closely with affiliates, and she's been working with Vince and the team here on their sustainability and recovery plan. So I want to thank them for being here. Thank all the board members. Thank all that have hung in with the Greater Stark County Urban League, but want all of you future leaders to know we need you. And we want you to be a part of something big, something great, something impactful, something that can help to change your own community. So thank you. I'll be happy to entertain questions or anything else.
We would like to make a presentation to you from Walsh University. I would like to introduce Dr. Mount, who's the Dean of Students of Walsh University, also Jan Honda.
Walsh got me a teddy bear. Thank you very much. So workout clothes, you got the gym nearby? I'm ready. I'm ready.
I also want to thank Brianna Wanda, who's made most of the arrangements for this on behalf of the Middle School business. Terrence Cordes, who is the Tutor Center Administrator at Walsh University. And where's Monique? Monique, thank you for bringing the event to Walsh University.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Ms. Morial, you can continue with your Q&A.
Yeah.
Thank you.
This gentleman. Yes. Well, what we propose in the Green Empowerment Zone idea is, let me just paint this picture. There's a lot of emphasis on green industries, right? So what's an example of green industry? One that's very obvious is solar panel manufacturing. So part of this is, why can't solar panels be manufactured or downtown Cleveland, or downtown Columbus, or downtown Toledo? Because the jobs that and the skills that are required to work in a solar panel manufacturing facility, many times high school, maybe a 2-year degree, or not even necessarily a 2-year degree. So the Green Empowerment Zone idea is that the government should create incentives, tax incentives, any type of incentive, to say to companies that do that kind of work, you should locate in the inner city, and we'll give you the tax incentive if you locate in the inner city, and you make a commitment to hire people in the inner city for 50% of the jobs. Now, that idea makes a lot of sense. We haven't gotten a lot of traction. We've gotten a lot of people saying, boy, that's a good idea. But we're looking for some member of Congress who's willing to introduce legislation to create that idea. So that's the idea. It doesn't have to be solar panel manufacturing, anything that is described as being green. We have to keep the green jobs here in the United States. You know where the solar panels are being made now? China. Why should we go from being dependent on Middle East oil to being dependent on Chinese-made solar panels? Some of this does not require a PhD in economics. Some of it requires a PhD in common sense. Thank you. Any other questions? Y'all ready? Yes, sir. Here's what I think about Occupy Wall Street. I think Occupy Wall Street is the message of Occupy Wall Street is a positive message, and it reflects more people hearing what organizations like the National Urban League are talking and that is this growing wealth gap. This growing wealth gap we have reported on every year, every March, when we release our big report. But people haven't been paying attention. And the reason why, the wake-up call has been all of a sudden 14 million people are out of work. And they go through being out of work, and then they say, how did we get in this kind of situation? And I think what triggered it is that the response to the economic downturn was to bail out big banks. And I'm going to tell you, we at the National Urban League supported the bailout of the banks, but said at the time, you got a Wall Street bailout, we need a Main Street bailout. The Main Street bailout never really came. It was pieces and parcels, but wasn't forceful enough and strong enough to help people. So to the extent that the Wall Street movement helps to educate people about the growing wealth disparities, there's a great disparity in this country between black and white wealth and black and white income. There's also a great disparity in this country between all people who are in what I call the bottom 3/5 and the people in the top 5th in terms of income and wealth. I think it's important, and for students who are studying business, economics, statistics, math, to go really look at this with a little bit of a microscope. Go educate. I was shocked when 3 years ago, the numbers, our economic team did a report for us and put the numbers in front of us that showed a 30-year trend line. And the 30-year trend line, and they juxtaposed the 30-year trend line against the previous 30-year trend line. Now, the previous 30 years, I'm talking about 1945 to around 1975 or 80, in that time period, the United States made progress in reducing the gap between rich and poor. After 1975, the gap increased. One of the ways the gap increases is that the people at the top saw their incomes and wealth take off like this. And what happened to people in the middle and the bottom, it just kind of rocked along the same. And this is really a very important issue because the principal value of democracy and free enterprise is that it ensures the philosophy, upward mobility. And when it ceases to provide upward mobility, then it means it's time to examine and reform whatever's causing people to be stuck and other people to continue to surge. The other thing you should recognize too, and this is the other thing, more and more, for many, many people, and this is important when you, some of you may already be parents, some of you may become parents, is what you leave and what you do for your children. Because a great deal of wealth in this country comes from intergenerational transfers. You know, now, people say, I'm not just talking about what you leave when you die. I'm talking about, do you have the wherewithal? Have you developed the wherewithal and the priority so that when it's time for your children to go to college, you say, I have saved enough so that you can go to college without going into big debt? Or number two, have I saved enough so that when my young person is 27, 28 years old and they say, I want to buy a house, I say, I will give you $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 towards a down payment. Not having to start life in debt and being able to begin life acquiring assets makes a huge difference. You take two young people, let's presume they're both 4.0s. They both went to the same school. Everything about them is relatively equal. This one over here had to borrow to the hilt to finish college and had to work the whole time they were in college. This student over here didn't have to borrow nor work. This one here, this student here is going to start their first job in debt. 5 years, 10 years, 15 years of debt. This student is going to start with no debt. This student is in a better position immediately to what? Have a higher what? Quality of life. This student is going to be paid. This student still made the absolute right decision by going to college and going into debt. Make no mistake about it, they still made the right decision. But think about how you want to position the next generation. So what you're doing, and as you build your personal profile, your career, is not just about me and my bling. It's about me and my legacy. Balance and think ahead. So in this country, it is a challenge to America's economic competitiveness if it's too expensive to go to college. If it's too expensive to go to college. So young students have to advocate for low interest loan programs, grant programs, scholarship programs, aid to education. You have to say to these governors and these legislators, don't cut our schools. Don't cut the loan programs. Why don't we buy 100,000 fewer tanks? Those are what we're talking about. My point is to bring it all back together. You have to organize your voice on these issues. Your voters, your citizens, your consumers. You have the voice you want to have. Anyone else? Yes.
Back to the previous question. As they're sending jobs overseas, just what you said really hits home with a lot of people. You don't need a PhD to perform certain criteria, but a lot of jobs now, as I'm job hunting in corporate America, jobs that I have performed without any degree and filled in for engineers. Now they're wanting people to have masters or PhDs. However, they'll consolidate their companies, downsize them, and send these jobs to other countries. And they're requiring so much more education for a job that the requirements are, we could train somebody, a technician, to do this stuff. How do you feel about that? And for instance, I've seen corporations, they won't hire you as an employee because you're not qualified to be an employee with benefits, but they'll hire you as a contract worker.
You know, companies are, they're always in a cost reduction, expense management mode.
Okay.
What I will say to you is the reality check is this is why I encourage young people to get as much education as you can. Because things will change. A job today that may require less than college might tomorrow require college. Sometimes the work in the workplace, particularly in office environments, have become more complex. People have to learn to use computers and machinery. They have to know how to analyze data and information and do things that they have to be able to multitask. And maybe the job 20 years ago allowed them to do 2 functions or 3 functions. Now they're expected to do 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. The workplace is changing. The best way you can be honest with yourself is to get the most preparation, training, and education that you can. I mean, you know, you've got to build your own profile. And everybody's got to do as much as you can. It's not uncommon today for people to, and there are options. I mean, there's online universities, there's adult evening classes, weekend classes. It's not uncommon for people who are in their 30s and 40s to go back and get bachelor's degrees, complete their bachelor's degrees, go get a master's degree. I know someone working on a PhD now in their early 50s because they're interested in enhancing themselves. They think it's going to give them an advantage, you know, in the workplace. You can't quit. The world is no longer where I'm 22, 23, 24, I got a college degree, I'm finished learning. And everybody's got to build personal profiles. I think what every young person should have is a personal plan. You got to have a personal plan. You got to think, sit down and think, what's my plan? What's my plan? And modify it. And don't be afraid to put it on paper. And don't be afraid to talk to your friends. What's your plan? What's your plan? What's your objective? How are you going to get there? And don't be afraid to share with each other tips. You know, this generation, I'll say this is interesting. This generation has access to so much information. You know, I tell this story. This is an interesting story because I was in college in the late 70s. I finished in 80. And, you know, they give you these term papers to write, 20-page term. And, you know, it's in the middle of the winter. I went to school in Philadelphia. Well, what that meant was I had to put on my coat, go all the way down to the library, spent about half a day in the library looking for the right books, doing all the research. Then go out there and have a pocket full of dimes, because that's what the copy machine was. Then I had to copy everything. Then I would go back to my room because I had a penchant for wanting to socialize a lot. So go back to my room and then start writing. And then you have to type. You have to use whiteout. It took a long time. I'm thinking, man, now